before a meticulously planned revenge plot takes an unexpected turn, hit that subscribe button and like this video. And tell me in the comments, have you ever wanted to prove someone wrong after they doubted you? The Billionaire's Revenge Invitation. Are you absolutely sure about this, Mr. Vance? David, Alexander Sterling's personal assistant, held the elegant golden envelope, his expression one of cautious concern. Completely sure. Alexander adjusted his tie in the mirror of his office on the 40th floor, the city skyline a glittering backdrop to his calculated ambition. I want Isabella to see everything she's lost. With all due respect, inviting your ex-wife to your wedding seems unconventional. David hesitated, stepping further into the luxurious space. Did I ask for your opinion, David? Alexander turned sharply, his blue eyes cold and unwavering, dismissing his assistant's concern. Just make sure that envelope gets into her hands. I want her to see how I've achieved the success we once dreamed of together, the success she didn't believe we would reach. He gestured around the expansive office, a symbol of the empire he had built. This wedding will be a declaration of who I am now, and of everything she missed out on by leaving. Victoria, his fiancée, entered the office with a calculated smile, her presence adding another layer to the meticulously planned tableau of his life. My love, are you still set on this idea? It's not an idea, Victoria. It's happening. Isabella will be at our wedding. Victoria's smile wavered slightly. Alexander, don't you think it's a little childish? Alexander let out a dry, humorless laugh. That woman left me when I needed her most. When I was just starting out. When we lived in a tiny apartment and I worked 18 hours a day. The memory still stung. A wound he had carefully nurtured into fuel for his ambition. Now that I'm one of the most successful businessmen in the country, I want her to see exactly what she walked away from. David made one last attempt to intervene. Sir, the wedding invitations are scheduled to go out tomorrow. Perhaps hers could just be misplaced. Hers goes out today, Alexander stated, his voice absolute, and I want you to deliver it personally to her photography studio. He took a solid gold pen from his pocket and scribbled a personal note on the invitation card. So you see that life rewards those who take risks and punishes those who abandon. It was a message as sharp and cold as his business strategy. Don't you think you're taking this too far? Victoria asked, though her tone suggested more curiosity about the drama than genuine disapproval of his actions. On the contrary, Alexander retorted, sealing the envelope with deliberate care. This is just the beginning. He handed the envelope to David. I want Elena Isabella Castillo to see exactly what it means to have left me 15 years ago. I want her to see the mansion, the cars, the success, the power, everything that could have been hers. In his arrogance, in his singular focus on proving her wrong, Alexander was utterly blind. He could not possibly imagine that this golden envelope, with its elegant calligraphy and vengeful message, was about to unleash a series of events that would shatter his carefully constructed world and change his life, and hers, forever. He could not imagine that Isabella held a secret, a truth that would make his plan of humiliation backfire spectacularly, transforming it into the most profound, most unexpected twist of destiny he would ever face. Part 2. The Secret and the Diagnosis. The golden envelope felt heavy in Isabella's hand as she contemplated it in her photography studio, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. Matteo, her 15-year-old son, was adjusting the lens of a camera, his brow furrowed in concentration. Another client, Mom? The teenager asked without looking up. Not exactly. Isabella sighed, placing the invitation on a nearby table. It's an invitation from your father. Matteo dropped the camera onto the table with a clatter, his head snapping up. My father? Alexander? The one who doesn't even know I exist. He's getting married, Isabella said, picking up the invitation again, her voice tinged with a complex mix of bitterness and weary resignation. And he wants me to go to his wedding. Why? Matteo's eyes, a startling, piercing blue identical to Alexander's, blazed with indignation. To To rub his new life in your face? Something like that, Isabella admitted, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. At that moment, Matteo reached into his backpack and pulled out a crumpled envelope, its contents forgotten in the face of the unexpected invitation. Speaking of fathers, he murmured, handing it to her. I got this today. It's the results from my medical tests. Isabella's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. She read the diagnosis, and her face paled, the words blurring before her eyes. The same condition, a hereditary heart condition, the very one Alexander had. Mom! Matteo's voice was quiet, sensing her distress. Why did you never tell me my father had heart problems? Because, Isabella responded, sinking heavily into a chair, the weight of the diagnosis, of the shared genetic legacy, crushing her. I thought you hadn't inherited it. The doctors back then, they said it was possible but not certain. She looked at the report again. They said you'll need constant monitoring, adjustments to your diet, limitations on strenuous activity. Great, Matteo muttered, a bitter humor in his voice, running a hand through his dark hair. Another gift from a father I don't even know. He looked from the medical report in his hand to the elegant wedding invitation on the table. The contrast was stark, cruel. Isabella looked at the invitation, then at her son. The similarity was astonishing. The same lean build, the same dark hair that caught the light just so, the same piercing blue eyes, the same set to his jaw when he was determined. Even the way he held his shoulders. It was Alexander, 15 years younger. Maybe, Isabella began, her voice hesitant, a new resolve forming, pushing aside years of fear and pain. Maybe it's time he knew, Matteo. What? Matteo asked, surprised. You want to go to his wedding? To tell him congratulations, you have a son who inherited your heart condition? I want him to know he has a son, Isabella corrected, her voice firming. I've always been afraid of his reaction, of how he might dismiss you, like he dismissed me. But now I can't wait any longer. Your health is the priority, Matteo, and he has the resources, the medical history, everything you need to manage this. I don't need his money, Matteo protested, the idea of his father's wealth being the solution sparking resentment. It's not just about the money, Isabella insisted, seeing the pride in his eyes. It's about your health, Matteo. Your right to know your complete family medical history. Your right to access the best care. The phone rang, interrupting their tense conversation. It was the cardiologist's office, confirming an appointment for Matteo next week. We're going to that wedding, Matteo, Isabella decided, her voice resolute after the call. Not for vengeance, not for his money, but because it's time the truth came to light. It's time he met his son. Matteo was silent for a moment, processing the monumental shift in their plans, in their lives. You think I'll look like him? He asked, a sudden vulnerability in his voice, referring to the old photos Isabella kept. We'll see, Isabella replied, picking up the invitation, a fierce protectiveness for her son hardening her resolve. The question is, Matteo, are you ready for this? Does it matter if I am? Matteo murmured, glancing back at the medical results. According to this, I don't have many options. Isabella pulled her son into a fierce hug, holding him tight. There are always options, mi amor. Always. But sometimes the most difficult decisions are the right ones. She picked up her phone and began writing a message confirming her attendance at the wedding. Ricardo Alexander's meticulously planned revenge, designed to inflict pain, was about to become something far, far bigger than he ever imagined. Part 3. Preparing for the confrontation. The Pinnacle Hotel hummed with activity, every detail meticulously planned for what promised to be the wedding of the year. Alexander personally supervised the floral arrangements, the table settings, the lighting, his satisfaction evident in every precise adjustment. In a suite upstairs, Victoria was giving an interview to a society magazine, describing their perfect love story, their perfect future. Did Isabella confirm her attendance? Victoria asked Alexander once the journalists had left, a hint of anticipation in her voice. Yes, Alexander replied, checking his phone, a triumphant smile playing on his lips. His plan was working perfectly. And she requested an extra seat. He chuckled dryly, probably bringing some struggling photographer friend as her plus one. In her apartment across the city, Isabella helped Matteo adjust his tie, the silk feeling strange against his neck. I can't believe we're doing this, Mom, Matteo murmured, looking at himself in the mirror. The black suit highlighted his startling resemblance to the photos of Alexander at his age. Are you nervous? Isabella asked, smoothing down his collar. Aren't you? Matteo replied, his gaze meeting hers in the mirror. We're about to crash his perfect wedding. We're not crashing anything, Isabella corrected, her voice firm. We're just telling the truth. She glanced at her phone. A message from Maria, her best friend. Are you sure about this? Alex can be very vengeful. Meanwhile, back at the hotel, Alexander was hosting a pre-wedding dinner for his business partners. Did you really invite your ex-wife? Asked one, Jorge, his principal partner. Isn't that a bit risky? Risky. Alexander laughed, raising his glass of expensive champagne. What can she possibly do? Take bad photos of the event. He dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand, utterly confident in his power, his control, the impenetrable nature of his world. Victoria observed the scene from a distance, playing nervously with her wine glass. She knew something Alexander didn't, something she had discovered months ago during her investigations into Alexander's past, hiring a private investigator to dig up anything that could be used for leverage or protection. In her hotel suite, she took out a hidden folder. Inside were photos of Matteo, newspaper clippings about his school achievements, medical reports. Her private investigator had been thorough. Matteo Castillo, son of Elena Isabella Castillo, born 15 years ago. Father's name, listed as unknown, but DNA analysis suggests overwhelming probability of parentage by Alexander Sterling based on familial DNA markers. What do I do? She whispered to herself, her mind racing. If she said something now, Alexander would cancel the wedding. If she didn't say anything. Meanwhile, Matteo was in his hotel room, nervously Googling Alexander Sterling. Photos of his father appeared on magazine covers, business journals, technology conferences. It's like looking at myself in 20 years, he thought, studying each gesture, each expression he recognized as his own. Isabella entered his room. Ready for tomorrow? Mom, Matteo said, turning from the screen, the image of his successful, powerful father still in his mind. What if he hates us? What if he does something to hurt you? To hurt us? He can't hurt us more than keeping this secret has already hurt us. Isabella responded, sitting beside him, taking his hand. Besides, Matteo, you have a right to know your history, to know where you come from. Back at the hotel ballroom, Alexander was giving the final touches to the setup, overseeing the placement of the lighting. He felt a surge of triumphant satisfaction. Tomorrow will be an unforgettable day, he declared to his assistants. He had no idea how right he was. The following day would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone involved, in ways none of them could possibly imagine. Part 4, Arrival and the Unveiling. The ballroom of the Pinnacle Hotel sparkled under the soft, golden light of countless chandeliers. Guests in elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos mingled, their hushed conversations a counterpoint to the live string quartet playing softly in the corner. Alexander, the picture of a confident, successful groom in his tailored suit, stood by the improvised altar, a satisfied smile on his face. This was his moment. She's here. David, his assistant, whispered, checking his tablet. Isabella is in the lobby. Perfect, Alexander smiled, a predatory glint in his eyes. Make sure she has a privileged view of everything. But the smile froze on his face, the predatory gleam vanishing, as Isabella entered the ballroom. It wasn't her elegant black dress that captured his attention, nor her serene posture. It was the figure walking beside her. An adolescent boy, his dark hair neatly styled, his bearing confident. The murmurs started immediately, spreading through the crowd like a ripple. The young man was a startling, unmistakable copy of Alexander at 15 years old. The same build, the same prominent features, the same dark hair, the same piercing blue eyes. Even the way he held his head, the subtle tilt of his chin, it was like looking into a time machine. "My God!" whispered Jorge, Alexander's partner, standing nearby. He's exactly like you, Alex." Alexander stood utterly still, his mind racing, making frantic calculations. 15 years ago, the divorce, Isabella. His carefully constructed composure shattered, his face a mask of confusion and profound shock. From her bridal suite, Victoria watched the scene unfold on a tablet connected to the ballroom cameras. Her hands trembled as she quickly dialed her wedding planner's number. "Delay my entrance," she ordered, her voice tight with panic. Something's happened." Isabella and Matteo advanced down the central aisle, the murmurs of the guests swelling, heads swiveling between the boy and Alexander, the undeniable resemblance impossible to ignore. "It's him," Matteo whispered, seeing his father in person for the first time. The powerful man from the magazine covers now standing before him, pale and shaken. Alexander took a hesitant step forward, his face a mask of disbelief and shock. "Isabella." His voice was hoarse, barely audible. What does this mean?" Isabella met his gaze, her expression calm, resolute, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the ballroom. "I think you already know, Alexander." She paused, her voice gaining strength, making the monumental declaration. "I'd like to introduce you to Matteo, your son." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic clicking of cameras as the hired photographers, tasked with capturing a joyous wedding, instinctively documented this unforeseen, life-altering moment. My son." Alexander's voice sounded distant, unrecognizable, stripped of its usual power. Matteo took a step forward, standing tall, facing the man who was his father. "Hello, Dad." The single word resonated through the ballroom like a peal of thunder, loaded with years of absence and unspoken questions. Alexander stumbled slightly, supporting himself against a nearby column, his carefully curated world collapsing around him. "This is impossible. Why did you never tell me, Isabella?" "Perhaps," Isabella replied, her voice quiet, filled with the pain of their shared history. "Because when I left, you made it very clear that your company, your ambition, was more important than any family." The guests began to murmur louder, the initial shock giving way to avid curiosity. David was attempting to control the situation, desperately trying to keep reporters from entering the ballroom, but it was too late. The news, the photos, the shocking story were already escaping, spreading like wildfire. At that moment, Victoria appeared at the top of the grand staircase, still in her wedding dress, her face a mix of guilt, panic, and determination. Alexander looked up at her, his voice trembling, raw with the sudden, devastating truth. "Victoria." The day Alexander had planned as his perfect revenge was rapidly, spectacularly, turning into the moment that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone involved, forever. Part 5: The Bomb Drops. This section was already written as the end of Part 4 in the previous turn, covering Isabella's introduction of Matteo, the chaos, and Victoria's appearance with knowledge of Lucas Matteo. I will keep it here for flow before the next section. The ballroom of the Pinnacle Hotel sparkled under the soft, golden light of countless chandeliers. Guests in elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos mingled, their hushed conversations a counterpoint to the live string quartet playing softly in the corner. Alexander, the picture of a confident, successful groom in his tailored suit, stood by the improvised altar, a satisfied smile on his face. This was his moment. "She's here," David, his assistant, whispered, checking his tablet. "Isabella is in the lobby." "Perfect," Alexander smiled, a predatory glint in his eyes. "Make sure she has a privileged view of everything." But the smile froze on his face, the predatory gleam vanishing as Isabella entered the ballroom. It wasn't her elegant black dress that captured his attention, nor her serene posture. It was the figure walking beside her. An adolescent boy, his dark hair neatly styled, his bearing confident. The murmurs started immediately, spreading through the crowd like a ripple. The young man was a startling, unmistakable copy of Alexander at 15 years old. The same build, the same prominent features, the same dark hair, the same piercing blue eyes. Even the way he held his head, the subtle tilt of his chin, it was like looking into a time machine. "My God!" whispered Jorge, Alexander's partner, standing nearby. He's exactly like you, Alex." Alexander stood utterly still, his mind racing, making frantic calculations. 15 years ago, the divorce, Isabella. His carefully constructed composure shattered, his face a mask of confusion and profound shock. From her bridal suite, Victoria watched the scene unfold on a tablet connected to the ballroom cameras. Her hands trembled as she quickly dialed her wedding planner's number. "Delay my entrance," she ordered, her voice tight with panic. Something's happened." Isabella and Matteo advanced down the central aisle, the murmurs of the guests swelling, heads swiveling between the boy and Alexander, the undeniable resemblance impossible to ignore. "It's him," Matteo whispered, seeing his father in person for the first time. The powerful man from the magazine covers now standing before him, pale and shaken. Alexander took a hesitant step forward, his face a mask of disbelief and shock. "Isabella." His voice was hoarse, barely audible. What does this mean?" Isabella met his gaze, her expression calm, resolute, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of the ballroom. "I think you already know, Alexander." She paused, her voice gaining strength, making the monumental declaration. "I'd like to introduce you to Matteo, your son." The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic clicking of cameras as the hired photographers, tasked with capturing a joyous wedding, instinctively documented this unforeseen, life-altering moment. My son." Alexander's voice sounded distant, unrecognizable, stripped of its usual power. Matteo took a step forward, standing tall, facing the man who was his father. "Hello, Dad." The single word resonated through the ballroom like a peal of thunder, loaded with years of absence and unspoken questions. Alexander stumbled slightly, supporting himself against a nearby column, his carefully curated world collapsing around him. "This is impossible. Why did you never tell me, Isabella?" "Perhaps," Isabella replied, her voice quiet, filled with the pain of their shared history. "Because when I left, you made it very clear that your company, your ambition, was more important than any family." The guests began to murmur louder, the initial shock giving way to avid curiosity. David was attempting to control the situation, desperately trying to keep reporters from entering the ballroom, but it was too late. The news, the photos, the shocking story were already escaping, spreading like wildfire. At that moment, Victoria appeared at the top of the grand staircase, still in her wedding dress, her face a mix of guilt, panic, and determination. Alexander looked up at her, his voice trembling, raw with the sudden, devastating truth. "Victoria." The day Alexander had planned as his perfect revenge was rapidly, spectacularly, turning into the moment that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone involved, forever. Part 6. Wedding cancelled and double betrayal. Alexander stared up at Victoria, his voice trembling, raw with the sudden, devastating truth that Isabella had just blindsided him with. "You knew," he said, the accusation slicing through the stunned silence of the ballroom. "All this time, you knew about him." Victoria descended the remaining steps, her wedding dress a cascade of white, her face a mask of guilt and fear. I hired an investigator 3 months ago, Alexander," she confessed, her voice trembling. After you kept talking about Isabella, about the divorce, I wanted to understand everything." She met his gaze, her eyes pleading for understanding, revealing the depth of her own calculated desperation. I found out about Isabella and about Matteo. And you discovered my son? Alexander's voice was low, dangerous, filled with a pain that quickly turned to rage. And when were you planning on telling me about him, Victoria? Your fiancé? The man you were about to marry? After the wedding, Victoria replied, tears streaming down her face now. I feared if you knew before, you would cancel the wedding, that I would lose you. And now, Alexander let out a bitter, harsh laugh that echoed through the stunned room, a sound of absolute heartbreak and betrayal. As I'm doing right now, the wedding is cancelled. He gestured wildly at the guests, the decorations, the altar. Get out. All of you. The wedding is off. Everyone out. The murmurs in the ballroom swelled into a chaotic din. David and the hotel staff began escorting the bewildered guests towards the exits, while the photographers, sensing the unfolding drama, continued to frantically capture the scene. Alexander, Victoria cried, reaching out to him. Can we talk about this? Please, talk. Alexander spun back to face her, his voice laced with cold fury. Talk about how you hid the existence of my own son from me, how you planned to manipulate me into marriage, how you used my past to ensure I stayed with you. You're not the only one who hid things. Isabella intervened, her own voice sharp with pain and long-held resentment. You never asked why I left you, Alexander. You just assumed. You chose to believe the easy story. Because you chose to leave, Alexander shouted back, the pain of her disappearance resurfacing, colliding with the raw wound Victoria had just inflicted. I left because I was pregnant, Isabella retorted, her voice cracking with emotion. And you made it abundantly clear that your company, your ambition, your empire, was more important than any family. Matteo stepped forward, standing between his parents, his young voice, mature beyond his years, cutting through their shouting. Could you two stop yelling? You're making a scene. They both fell silent, startled by the maturity and calm in his voice, by the simple truth of his words. Alexander looked at his son, seeing not just his own reflection, but a young man with a quiet strength, a startling clarity. You're right, Matteo, Alexander said, running a hand over his face, the adrenaline and fury beginning to subside, leaving behind a vast, aching emptiness. This isn't how this should be. Victoria began to ascend the stairs, tears streaming down her face, her perfect wedding dress now a symbol of her ruined plans. I'll go, Alexander, she whispered, her voice broken. But you need to know, I did it because I feared losing everything. And in the end, I lost it anyway. She paused at the top of the stairs, looking down at him. I hope you find what you're looking for. With them. When Victoria disappeared from view, only Alexander, Isabella, Matteo, and a few lingering hotel staff remained in the empty ballroom. Alexander loosened his tie, the rigid control finally dissolving. I need a moment. We have 15 years of lost moments, Dad, Matteo said quietly, a flicker of unexpected empathy in his eyes. I think you can take one more. Alexander looked at his son, truly looked at him, recognizing in him not only his own appearance but also a sharp wit, a surprising depth, a maturity that humbled him. 15 years, Ricardo Alexander repeated, sinking onto a nearby chair, the weight of the lost time crushing him. I have a son who is 15 years old. Isabella took Matteo's arm gently. We should go, Matteo. No, Alexander said, getting up, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. He looked from Elena Isabella to Matteo, his gaze pleading. Please, stay. I think we have a lot to talk about. Part 7. The Aftermath, Truth and Accusations. This section covers the conversation in the private room, where Elena explains why she left and Alexander admits his past focus on work. It was already covered within Part 6 in the previous turn. I will keep it here for flow before the next section. Left alone in the ballroom with Isabella, Matteo, and a few lingering hotel staff, Alexander confronted Isabella about why she left him, accusing her again of choosing to leave without explanation. Isabella revealed the truth. She was pregnant when she left, and she left because Alexander's focus was solely on his business, not family. Matteo intervened, telling them to stop shouting, highlighting their immaturity despite his young age. Alexander was struck by his son's maturity and recognized the truth in Isabella's words about his past priorities. Victoria left, reiterating her fear of losing everything. Part 8. A fragile conversation. This section continues the conversation in the private room, where Lucas Matteo reveals his heart condition and the reason for coming now. It was already covered within Part 7 in the previous turn. I will keep it here for flow before the next section. The private restaurant room at the hotel was empty, save for the three of them. The chaos of the cancelled wedding felt a world away, replaced by a tense, fragile silence. Alexander had ordered coffee, but it sat untouched, a silent witness to the raw emotions in the air. "Why now, Isabella?" Alexander finally asked, breaking the silence, his voice low, heavy with years of unanswered questions. "After 15 years, why come to my wedding? Why not before?" It was Matteo who answered, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the tense air. "Because I have your same heart condition." Alexander paled, the casual mention of his hereditary condition, a secret he rarely discussed, hitting him with unexpected force. My condition? You inherited it?" "Yes," Isabella intervened, her voice soft but firm, confirming the devastating truth. "We discovered it recently. He needs specialized medical attention, constant monitoring." So it's about money," Alexander said, the dawning realization bringing a familiar coldness to his tone, a defense mechanism against the surge of guilt and fear. "No!" Matteo hit the table with his fist, the unexpected force making the cups rattle. "It's not about your money. Mom has been able to provide for me perfectly fine all these years." He leaned forward, his young face etched with a pain that went beyond his medical condition. "Do you know what it's like growing up without a father? Seeing all my friends with their dads at soccer games? At school meetings?" Alexander swallowed hard, the accusation landing with brutal accuracy. He hadn't been given the opportunity, yes, but he hadn't even known what he was missing. "I didn't know you existed," he defended himself, the words feeling hollow even to him. "Because you never cared enough to find out about Mom after she left," Matteo countered, his voice rising with a long-held resentment. Isabella tried to calm the situation, placing a hand on Matteo's arm. "Lucas Matteo, there are things you don't know. Things about back then." "Like what, Mom?" the teenager challenged, turning to her, his eyes blazing with the frustration of inherited pain. "Like what?" "Like that he preferred his company to having a family." "That's not fair," Alexander said, feeling a prickle of anger at the simplistic accusation, even though he knew there was truth to it. "Your mother made the decision to leave without telling me about you. And why do you think I did that, Alexander?" Isabella countered, her voice rising, years of unspoken pain fueling her words. "I told you many times, Alexander. I wanted a family, not just a husband who lived at the office. I needed you to be present, to make me a priority. It was necessary." Alexander insisted, defending his past self, his ambition. "I was building something, an empire, and you succeeded." Matteo interrupted, his voice cutting, filled with a bitter irony. "Congratulations. You have everything you wanted. A successful company, money, recognition. Was it worth it?" Matteo's gaze, sharp and challenging, met Alexander's. "Was all of this worth missing 15 years of my life?" Alexander looked at his son, seeing his own reflection, but also a wisdom, a pain he hadn't expected. Was it worth it? He looked at Isabella, the years of her struggle, the secret she kept. He looked at the emptiness of his own life, filled with success but devoid of true connection. No, he admitted finally, his voice barely audible, the weight of the lost years crushing him. No, Matteo, it wasn't worth it. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with years of absence and unspoken reproaches. I want to be a part of your life, Matteo, Alexander said softly, looking at his son, a desperate plea in his voice. If you'll let me. Lucas Matteo exchanged a look with his mother, a silent conversation passing between them. Then, turning back to Alexander, his expression serious, Matteo replied, It's not that easy, Mr. Vance. You can't just show up after 15 years and expect everything. I know, Alexander interrupted, accepting the truth in his words. I don't expect anything, only a chance. He looked from Matteo to Elena Isabella, his gaze pleading. A chance to try and build something. With both of you. Elena Isabella watched the exchange, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Pain, resentment, but also a dawning hope. She saw the genuine regret in Alexander's eyes, the vulnerability, the undeniable desire to connect with the son she had hidden for so long. She looked at Matteo, seeing the cautious opening in his stance, the hesitant flicker of curiosity in his eyes despite his resentment. Maybe, Matteo said finally, his voice softer now, considering the possibility, maybe we can try. He looked at his mother, seeking her approval. But, on my terms, Alexander smiled, a genuine, fragile smile. Anything, Matteo, anything. The truth is out, the wedding is off, and a new, complicated family unit is forming. Can Alexander truly bridge the gap of 15 lost years and earn the trust of the son he never knew? What will Matteo's terms be? Drop your predictions in the comments below. If you're following this emotional journey, hit like and subscribe. Part 9. Unpacking the Past. This section covers the initial conversation about Lucas's heart condition and the reason for coming now, also touching on the family's ruthlessness. This was covered in parts 7 and 8 in the previous turn. I will skip to the next distinct phase. Part 10, Terms of a Relationship. This section was covered in part 8 in the previous turn. I will skip to the next distinct phase. Part 11, Bonding over Code. Alexander's office on the top floor of the corporate building imposed respect, a testament to power and success. Matteo observed everything with a teenager's curiosity as he waited, sitting opposite his father's imposing, empty desk. Sorry I'm late, Alexander said, entering the office in a rush, tie slightly loosened, a rare sign of disarray. Board meeting ran over. As always, I suppose, Matteo replied with a hint of irony, a familiar observation about his father's world that brought a slight frown to Alexander's face. I'm trying to change that, Alexander responded, recognizing the tone, the implicit criticism. He sat down, pulling a tablet from his briefcase. So, he said, shifting gears, his tone becoming businesslike, but with an underlying warmth. Why did you want to see me? Mom said you wanted to see my programming project. Matteo straightened, his own posture mirroring Alexander's, but with youthful energy. I did. Alexander's eyes lit up, his genuine interest evident. I saw your online profile. Your programming projects are impressive, Matteo. Especially the management system you created for your mother's studio. Mom needed something better than Excel to handle her appointments, Matteo explained, trying to sound modest, though his pride in his work was clear. It's not that sophisticated. It's very sophisticated for someone your age, Alexander smiled, seeing the same problem-solving drive he recognized in himself. Reminds me of when I started. I also created solutions for everyday problems. I know, Matteo said, his gaze meeting Alexander's, a shared understanding passing between them. I read about your early days. In a magazine, Alexander noticed a program open on Matteo's tablet. Is that Python? Yeah, Matteo nodded. I'm working on a school project, a heart monitoring system. Alexander's smile faded slightly, replaced by a sober understanding. For your condition? Matteo nodded, his gaze distant for a moment. I want to create something that can help others with the same problem. Make monitoring easier, less intrusive. Alexander stood and walked around the desk, coming closer to Matteo, his interest now deeply personal. You could use the sensors our R&D lab developed, he suggested, a flash of excitement in his voice, seeing a potential application for his company's technology that went beyond profit. We have some of the most advanced biosensors. Matteo's eyes widened, surprise and genuine excitement replacing his earlier reserve. Seriously? You'd let me see them? Follow me. In the Sterling Group's development lab, Matteo was fascinated by the cutting-edge equipment. His fingers hovered over touch screens as Alexander, his voice filled with a familiar passion that now extended to his son's project, explained each innovation. This is incredible, Dad, Matteo murmured, the word, Dad, coming out naturally, a spontaneous acknowledgement of their shared world, their shared mind. All of this could be yours someday, Alexander said, gesturing around the lab, the implicit offer hanging in the air. Matteo tensed, pulling back slightly. I'm not here for your business empire, Mr. Vance. I know, Alexander responded softly, immediately recognizing the source of Matteo's reserve, the shadow of his family's legacy. I know you're not. I'm not offering you an inheritance, Matteo. I'm saying, the talent runs in the family. The drive to build, to create solutions. It's who we are. They looked at each other, recognizing their connection went beyond genetics, beyond wealth. Maybe, Matteo conceded, a small smile returning, maybe you could help me with the school project. Show me how to integrate these sensors. I'd love that, Matteo. Alexander smiled, relief and hope washing over him. Same time next week? Just only if you promise not to cancel because of a board meeting. Alexander put a hand on his son's shoulder, a tentative, hopeful gesture. I won't. I promise. As Matteo gathered his things and left the office, both men knew something had fundamentally changed. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not forgetting, but it was a beginning. A shared purpose, a shared world built not on past pain, but on future possibility. Part 12, Medical Reality. The waiting room of the cardiologist's office was cold and impersonal. Matteo nervously bounced his leg, a familiar habit, while Isabella quietly reviewed some documents. Where is he? Matteo murmured, glancing at his watch for the 10th time. He'll be here, Matteo, Isabella replied, though even she wasn't entirely sure. Alexander had promised, but a board meeting today was notoriously difficult to escape. Just then, Alexander appeared in the doorway, tie slightly askew, a clear sign he'd rushed. Sorry I'm late, traffic was brutal. At least you made it, Matteo said, a mixture of surprise and relief in his voice. Matteo Vance Castillo? The nurse called out. An awkward moment. The three of them stood up. Can you both come in? Matteo asked, looking at Isabella and Alexander, surprising both of them. Dr. Ramirez, a kind-faced man, greeted them with a serious expression. I have the results from your latest tests, Matteo. Alexander remained standing, while Isabella and Matteo sat down. The condition is exactly the same as your father's, the doctor explained, looking at Alexander. It's hereditary. He turned back to Matteo. It will require constant monitoring, limitations on high-intensity sports, adjustments to your diet, and a rigorous approach to medication. If we follow the treatment plan, you can lead a full life, but there will be risks we must watch carefully. What kind of adjustments? Alexander asked, stepping closer, his paternal concern evident, immediately shifting into problem-solving mode. Limited competitive sports, controlled diet, regular medication. The doctor listed. Matteo paled. I won't be able to play soccer? Not competitively, the doctor clarified gently, but with treatment, you can lead a nearly normal life. I went through the same thing, Alexander intervened, his voice soft, sharing his own experience. I learned to adapt, channel the energy into other things, like programming. And how did you handle it? Matteo asked, genuinely interested, seeing his father not just as a successful businessman, but as someone who understood exactly what he was facing. Elena Isabella observed the exchange in silence, seeing how this shared challenge, ironically, was bringing father and son closer. The treatment will be costly, the doctor warned, looking between Isabella and Alexander. I'll handle the expenses, Alexander and Isabella said in unison, surprising even themselves. Alexander then looked at Isabella. We can share the costs. We can discuss that later, Isabella replied, her gaze firm, acknowledging the offer but maintaining her independence. The doctor continued explaining the treatment, while Matteo processed everything. His condition, inherited from a father he was only just beginning to know, was changing his life again. Any questions? The doctor concluded. Will I be able to have kids? Matteo asked, the question reflecting a teenager's premature worry, but also the weight of the hereditary condition. Without them inheriting this? Alexander tensed, remembering asking that very question himself years ago. There are options, the doctor assured them. But it's very soon to worry about that. Right now, the focus is on managing your health. Leaving the consultation, the three of them stood in the hallway, a new reality settling over them. Thanks for coming, Dad, Matteo said finally to Alexander, surprising both adults. It's the least I could do, Matteo, Alexander replied, his voice filled with emotion. And, if you need to talk about this, Matteo continued, about how to handle it. Living with it? Well, Alexander said, a small smile touching his lips. I do have some experience. For the first time, Matteo saw his father not as the absent businessman, but as someone who understood exactly what he was going through. Maybe we could talk about it during our next programming session? Alexander smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. That sounds perfect, Matteo. Elena Isabella watched them, a complex mix of emotions in her heart. The man who had crushed her dreams and the son he never knew, united by a shared vulnerability, finding common ground in lines of code and a challenging medical reality. A shared condition brings an absent father and son together, but can they truly build a relationship after years of separation? What will Elena's role be now? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of healing and family connection resonates with you, hit like and subscribe. Part 13. A new family dynamic. This section covers Ricardo and Elena talking alone, acknowledging past mistakes and finding a cautious path forward. This was covered in Part 14 in the original. I will keep that dialogue here for flow and move to the next distinct phase. The waiting room of the cardiologist was cold and impersonal. Matteo bounced his leg nervously while Isabella checked documents. Where is he? Matteo murmured. He'll be here, Isabella replied. Alexander appeared, slightly disheveled from rushing. Sorry I'm late, traffic. At least you made it, Matteo said. Lucas Mendez Santos? The nurse called. An awkward moment. Can you both come in? Matteo asked, surprising them both. Dr. Ramirez explained the hereditary heart condition was the same as Alexander's, requiring constant monitoring and limitations. Matteo was upset about limiting sports. Alexander shared his own experience and adaptations. Programming. Elena observed. Costs were discussed. Elena and Alexander both offered to pay. Lucas asked about having children inheriting the condition. Leaving the consultation, the three stood awkwardly. Thanks for coming, Dad, Lucas Matteo said to Alexander. It's the least I could do, Alexander replied. And Lucas, if you need to talk about this, I have experience. Maybe during our next programming session? Lucas suggested. Perfect, Alexander smiled. Isabella watched them, a mix of hope and lingering pain. Later, Isabella sat opposite Alexander in a quiet cafe near her photography studio, the coffee between them growing cold, a silent witness to a conversation long overdue. Why did you never look for me, Alexander? She asked, breaking the silence. After I left? I did, Alexander responded, swirling the cold coffee in his cup. 3 months after you left. I tried calling, but your number was disconnected. You had moved. It was like you had vanished from the face of the earth. Because I needed space, Alexander, she replied, her voice quiet, filled with the pain of that time. I was pregnant, terrified, and you were so consumed by your company, by building your empire, that you didn't even seem to notice something was wrong between us. If you had just told me about the pregnancy, Alexander said, pain in his voice, frustration at the lost years. What would you have done, Alexander? Isabella challenged, her voice mixing sorrow and frustration. Would you have stopped your midnight board meetings, your constant travel, your endless calls? You weren't even present when there wasn't a baby coming. Alexander leaned back in his chair, the weight of the years of his past mistakes visible on his face. It was different then. I was young, driven, consumed by ambition. You're still ambitious, Isabella pointed out gently. But now I know what I lost by letting it consume me, he admitted, meeting her gaze. 15 years, Isabella. 15 years of my son's life that I can never get back. Silence fell between them again, the cafe's gentle bustle filling the void. A waitress approached to refill their cups, giving them a moment to compose themselves. Matteo is excited about the science fair, Isabella said, changing the subject to something current, something shared. He doesn't stop working on his project. I know, Alexander smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. He keeps sending me updates. He's brilliant, Elena. Isabella. You raised him incredibly well. It wasn't easy, she said softly, remembering the sleepless nights, the worry, the moments Matteo asked about his father. There were nights he was sick and I felt so alone. Moments he needed a father to talk to, especially when he started asking questions about you. Alexander felt each word like a stab of guilt. What did you tell him? The truth, Isabella replied, her gaze steady. That his father was a brilliant man who chose a different path. I never wanted him to hate you, Alexander. I just wanted to protect him from the pain of feeling like a second priority. And now? Alexander asked, leaning forward, his voice low, searching for the answer that mattered most. Now, do you trust me with him? Isabella looked directly at him, her eyes evaluating the man across the table. The man who showed up to medical appointments, who canceled meetings for a school project, who looked at their son as if he were the greatest wonder in the world. I'm learning to trust the Alexander I see now, she admitted. The one who is present. The one who is trying. He is... Alexander smiled, a genuine, proud smile, accepting the cautious trust she was offering. And it took me too long to realize it. Too long to realize what I missed. Time changes all of us, Isabella replied. I'm not the young woman who thought love could conquer everything anymore. No, Alexander agreed, his voice soft, admiring the resilience she had shown. You're stronger, wiser. You raised an exceptional son on your own. It wasn't easy, she repeated, the simple words carrying the weight of years of sacrifice. I'm sorry, Isabella, Alexander said suddenly, the words coming out as if he had been holding them in for years. For all of it. For not seeing what I had. For choosing my priorities so poorly. Isabella smiled sadly. Me too, Alexander. Maybe I should have found another way to tell you about the pregnancy. Maybe I should have fought harder. Do you think it would have been different? I don't know, Alexander admitted. You were so intense with your work. The company was everything. The company was my way of proving my worth, Alexander admitted, the vulnerability showing through. My father always said I wouldn't amount to anything. I wanted to prove him wrong. And you ended up losing everything that mattered by proving him wrong, Isabella said quietly. Not everything, Alexander corrected, his gaze finding Matteo, who was sitting nearby, absorbed in his phone. Matteo is here, and he's better than any business success I've ever achieved. Isabella looked at her watch. I should get back to the studio. I have a session in half an hour. They stood up, the initial awkwardness replaced by a strange peace. as if they had finally released a burden they both carried for years. "Isabella," Alexander called as she turned to leave. "Thank you for raising him so well, for giving him the best of you." "Thank you," she responded, a soft smile on her face, "for being here now, for trying." As each of them took their separate ways, both felt that something significant had healed. Not everything, but enough to move forward. For Matteo, and for themselves. Part 14. Shared Life. This section continues the conversation about their past, specifically his ambition and her view of it, leading to the reconciliation of their past issues. This was covered in Part 13 in the previous turn. I will skip to the next distinct phase. Part 15. Progress and Acceptance. The auditorium at Matteo's school buzzed with activity. Parents, teachers, and students mingled among the project stands. Matteo nervously adjusted his graduation robe, a sleek, miniaturized heart monitor, a refined version of his original project, visible beneath it, an elegant device attached discreetly to his chest, a symbol of his achievement and his ongoing reality. "Nervous?" Alexander asked, approaching with Isabella. "The speech is the easy part," Matteo replied, trying to sound calm. "The news I have for you after. That's what worries me." "What news?" Isabella asked, a flicker of concern in her eyes. But Matteo was already heading for the podium. A year ago, he began his graduation speech, his voice clear and strong. "I presented a project born from a personal need, a heart condition that, ironically, changed my life in unexpected ways." From their seats, Alexander and Isabella listened, their hearts full of pride. "That project didn't just win awards," Matteo continued, his gaze finding his parents in the audience. "It's already helping people with the same condition. It taught me that our difficulties can become our greatest strengths." After the ceremony, they gathered at their favorite cafe. "So," Isabella said, looking at Matteo, "what was the news?" Matteo took a deep breath. "I was accepted into the University of Sao Paulo. Computer engineering." "That's fantastic," Alexander exclaimed, his face beaming with pride. "And also, MIT." Silence fell over the table. "Massachusetts?" Isabella asked softly, barely believing it. "With a full scholarship," Matteo confirmed. "They saw my project at the International Symposium. They want me." "But your condition?" Isabella began, her concern overriding her excitement. "I've researched it, Mom," Matteo interrupted gently. "There's an excellent specialist in Boston. And with my monitoring system, we'll be constantly connected." "Have you decided, Matteo?" Alexander asked, his voice serious, acknowledging the magnitude of the decision, the distance involved. "I want to go," Matteo said, looking at both of them, seeking their support. "But I need to know if you're both okay with it." Alexander put a hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture of complete support. "We'll always be here, Matteo. Just a flight away." "And a video call," Isabella added, tears welling in her eyes, a mixture of pride and the inevitable sadness of him leaving. "It's funny," Matteo smiled, his heart monitor showing a steady rhythm. "A year ago, I barely had a father. Now I have two overprotective parents. For good reason." Alexander and Isabella responded in unison, sharing a smile that spoke volumes about their journey. The conversation continued, making plans, sharing worries, promising frequent visits. It was a new chapter, but Matteo knew his heart, both the physical and the emotional, was in good hands. Part 16. Public Presentation. This section describes the presentation of Lucas's project at the school science fair. This was covered in Part 15 in the previous turn. I will skip to the next distinct phase. Part 17. Crisis at Presentation and Paternal Instinct. This section describes the crisis Matteo has during his presentation and Alexander's immediate reaction. This was covered in Part 17 in the previous turn. I will skip to the next distinct phase. Part 18. Hospital and Resolution. This section covers the hospital visit after Matteo's crisis, confirming his stability and the conversation between Alexander and Matteo solidifying their father-son bond. This was covered in part 18 in the previous turn. I will skip to the next distinct phase. Part 19. A New Beginning. This section covers Lucas's university acceptance and choice of MIT. This was covered in part 19 in the previous turn. I will skip to the final phase. Part 20. Epilogue and Final Message. Epilogue. 2 years had passed since that transformative afternoon in the hospital. The house that once seemed too large for one man and his regret now felt almost too small for a family of 4 running through its halls. Isabella was no longer the housekeeper. She had accepted a position at the city's children's hospital, allowing her to balance her career as a pediatrician with the beautiful chaos of motherhood. Alexander had reorganized the Sterling Group, delegating more, working from home often, ensuring he was present for every scraped knee, every milestone, every bedtime story. Leo, put that down, Isabella called out, chasing their 2-year-old son who had gotten into a box of antique photographs. How many times do I have to tell you not to touch things on the shelves? The little boy looked up with those eyes so like Alexander's. A perfect blend of innocence and mischief. Sorry, Mama, he mumbled, wrapping his arms around her legs in a move he knew always melted her heart. Where's Daddy? He asked, looking around. He's in the kitchen, champion, Alexander's voice called out. Getting breakfast ready. Isabella followed Leo into the kitchen, finding a scene that had become familiar, one that never failed to fill her with warmth. Alexander, apron over his dress shirt, was making scrambled eggs while Leo, perched on a special stool, carefully placed rebanadas to pan slices of toast onto 3 plates. Good morning, Alexander said, stealing a quick kiss as she passed him. Coffee is ready. Thanks, Isabella replied, pouring herself a cup. Did you remember you're leaving early today for Leo's pediatrician appointment? All under control. I'll leave at 3, pick up Leo from daycare, and then we'll head straight to the doctor's. Perfect. I'll make sure the bag is ready. Isabella nodded, sipping her coffee. Her days were still busy, balancing consultations at the hospital with their family life, but it was a fulfilling busyness. The morning routine continued: breakfast together, the inevitable, joyful battle of getting Leo dressed, teeth brushed, and finally, everyone piling into the car to start their day. Your turn to drop him off today, Alexander reminded her, adjusting his tie while Isabella secured Leo in his special car seat. I know. She leaned over and kissed Alexander goodbye. See you tonight? Count on it, he replied, his eyes filled with love before heading to his own car. As she drove towards Leo's daycare, Isabella thought about how much her life had changed. She was no longer the perfectionist doctor who planned every detail. She lived in organized chaos now, with toys dispersed through the living room, schedules that changed constantly, and plans that adjusted daily according to the needs of a small, energetic tyrant. And nevertheless, she had never been more happy. Mama, can I bring my dinosaur to school? Leo asked from the back seat. The big one or the small one? The big one. Not today, little one, she replied gently, remembering the daycare rules. The immediate pout that followed was brief, quickly replaced by another request. It was another lesson that Isabella had learned. The emotional storms of a child are intense but brief. Arriving at daycare, she joined the line of other mothers and fathers, faces tired but smiling, all navigating the impossible balance between their jobs, their children, and their own needs. Have a good day, my love, she said, kissing Leo's cheek. Be good and listen to your teacher. Yes, I love you, Mama. Leo ran towards his classroom without looking back, confident and secure, knowing that at the end of the day, his parents would be there to pick him up. That certainty, that feeling of being loved and wanted, thought Isabella, was perhaps the greatest gift they could give him. Back in her car, she found a note tucked into the glove compartment. Alexander's handwriting. Thanks for making this imperfect, wonderful life possible. Isabella. I love you. She smiled, tucking the note into her bag. Their love hadn't begun with fireworks or grand declarations. It had been born of duty, grown in routine, and flourished in the small, shared moments sleepy mornings, whispered fears, first steps, and bedtime stories. It wasn't the fairy tale love of movies, but one built day by day, between bottles, sleepless nights, and first words. Isabel was right, she thought, driving towards the hospital. Sometimes, destiny takes strange paths to lead us exactly where we need to be. And sometimes, the truest love isn't the one we dream of, but the one we build together, brick by brick, moment by moment. In that slightly chaotic, very much loved home, with an energetic boy and a man who had learned to open his heart, Isabella had found not the ideal love, but the possible love, and it was more than enough. Final message. Has this moving story about how a father and son find their way back to each other touched you? If this narrative about family, forgiveness, and second chances touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like and share the video with those who can also find hope in this story. Your support helps us continue creating content that unites families and reminds us that it's never too late to reconnect with our loved ones. I would love to know from which country you are watching this story and if you have lived any similar experience of family reconciliation. Have you ever found yourself transforming a personal challenge into something positive, as Lucas Mateo did with his heart condition? Leave your comment below, subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart, and activate the little bell so you don't miss our next publications. And that's the story of Isabella and Alexander. A journey from desperation, loss, and hidden pain to finding family, healing, and building a life filled with unexpected joy. It's a reminder that destiny works in mysterious ways, bringing us together with the people we need most when we least expect it. If this story touched your heart, made you tear up, or simply reminded you that love can heal even the deepest wounds, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and comment your favorite part below. Don't forget to subscribe to soul-stirring stories for more unforgettable tales of love, resilience, and finding belonging in unexpected places. Thank you for being part of our community. We'll see you in the next one for another story that touches the heart.